Hi, I'm Gareth, and in this video we're going to consider how to write syncopated rhythms. So first of all, what do I mean by a syncopated rhythm? Well, quite often rhythm goes on beats, doesn't it? Like this little example I've got on the board. Like you can hear, that's beat 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So those are notes and chords that are happening on the beats. But if I get things happening in between the beats, then this generates a little syncopation. So if I take the same thing and play this, can you hear that? Ba ba dum bum on the top is a syncopated rhythm because I've got notes coming between the beats. Bum ba ba bum. And this gives rhythm a real character of its own. Now, you might not want to use this in every particular musical style, but it's amazing how many different musical styles do use it. So, for example, have a look at this score of Scott Joplin's piece, The Entertainer. It's a very famous piece. That's why I've chosen it, because probably most people will have heard of it. Well, if you look at the first bar, or the first measure, Scott Joplin could have written this. And then he could have carried on. And there wouldn't have been any syncopation in sight. But you notice what he does? In the first bar, the first measure, when you come to the third note, he ties it into the fourth note. So we get this note that starts in the last quarter of the first beat, ties over into the second beat, and the next note comes on the second quarter of the second beat. So by kind of jarring the position of that, it creates a syncopation. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So you see nothing's happening on beat 2 because of that tied note, but we've got things happening between the beats and between the half beats. So you get this syncopation. Now, when it gets into the main tune on the second line, can you see what's happening in the right hand? You're getting 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. So there's syncopation happening there. The left hand is just going on the beats and the half beats. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So that's kind of maintaining the beats and the half beats. The right hand is getting these rhythms positioned in between beats, in between half beats. And you see what's happening. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. So you see how the syncopations actually are the things that give the entertainer its real character. So ragtime music is written with this syncopated style absolutely central to it. So it's a great example of syncopation. And you can see actually how it makes the music much more interesting than if you didn't have the syncopation. You know, if he'd written, it wouldn't have been as interesting, would it? So the syncopation really gives it extra character. So is this just something that we do in more modern music, maybe 20th century music, sort of jazz stuff, light-hearted stuff? Well, absolutely not, because it's existed for a very long time. So have a look at this example, which is from Bach's second partita. And when we look into this andante section after the opening, you'll find there's syncopation all over the place. So if you have a look at bar 10, measure 10, can you hear you've got this same sort of Scott Joplin thing going on with the syncopation in the right hand, but now we're talking about Bach. So you see lots of syncopation going on there. So we've got notes that are tied, that are going on between the beats and the half beats in exactly the same way that we heard in the Scott Joplin. And it's not just an occasional thing, because if you look from that bar 10 there, and we go on from there, you'll find syncopation appearing quite a lot. So I'll start again in bar 10, syncopation, and again. Little bit of something there, and again. something here. And again. And again. And again. And again. And so it goes on. So you see, actually, in that particular section, there's quite a lot of syncopation. Here's a piece written by a composer from the Baroque period. So it's not particular to one style, although it's commonly claimed that it is. It's been around forever, and it's amazing how it gives the rhythm a kind of vitality. So it wouldn't be something to write in every style, but it works really well if you want to give your rhythm a bit of life. Let's now go back to what we've got on the board, because we really want to sort of think about, well, if you wanted to write syncopated rhythm, how would you actually do that? So here's 4 bars of something that I've written, and it sounds like this. Well, it's okay, isn't it? But it's a bit dull. You know, it's not the most exciting piece of music I've heard. But by doing a little bit of syncopation, you'll be amazed what we could do. So, for example, we just got to keep the harmony, but in the melody, how about if we do something like this? So I'm going to put a bit of syncopation in. So I'm keeping the same melody, and then in the next bar, I could do something very similar. So do you see? So we've got the G, F, E flat, but now it goes G, G, F, E flat. And then what was F, E flat, D now becomes F, F, E flat, D. Do you see there's suddenly a real bounce about the rhythm, isn't there? Well, you know, we could do the same with this little sort of bass thing in the next bar, couldn't we? And then maybe we could go back and do it in the top part, in the last bar. So I'm assuming that we can keep the rest of the harmony in place, so there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, so just to be crystal clear about how that might look, that we could keep all these notes going. What you might do, you might make little modifications once you've got the rhythm kind of going, is, you know, even something like this, just keeping a bit of movement in the bass part there. So it's not just kind of stationary, you know, because the original first bar or first measure was this. Well, actually sort of stopping dead there sort of fits with the slightly dull situation. If I've got a bit of syncopation there, I don't particularly want to do this. And sort of stop dead. I could do, but just by having an octave leap in the bass, you see, it just keeps things moving along a bit, doesn't it? So, you know, you could do the same thing in the next bar. I mean, like, have an octave leap in the bass there. And, you know, you could, for example, in the last bar as well, if you wanted to, have a little bit of a leap in the bass there. But basically, you can keep everything else the same. Okay, what does this sound like then? So the original thing sounds like this. I often find that students I teach write things like that, where the harmony works perfectly well, and they've managed to do that without breaking any rules of harmony. It all sounds nice. And then they just say to me, but it's a bit dull. And I quite often say to people who can write decent harmony and decent melodic lines, have you thought enough about the rhythmic construction, about the rhythmic character? Because sometimes doing something with a rhythm doesn't have to be syncopated, but doing something with a rhythm makes a huge difference. So that opening, if I did this, say, do you see, suddenly even that brings the rhythm to life, doesn't it? Rather than just going chord, chord, chord. But have a listen to the syncopation and see what you think. Do you see, that's got a completely different rhythmic life of its own. So the original kind of dull scheme suddenly becomes something with much more musical character and energy. And you think, oh, actually, I could be quite pleased with that as a little piece of music. So thinking about rhythmic character when we write, lots of people focus on melody, lots of people don't focus on chords or the other way around, but maybe don't think enough about the rhythm. But using syncopation can be a really good way just to inject that energy and vitality into the music. So have a bit of fun with syncopation.